back here on the Rich Eisen Show, is the founder of Pro Football Talk, also the host of PFT Live on Peacock, which is an app that you can get right here on the Roku platform. Also, he's got a new book coming out, a novel that he wrote during the pandemic, coming out what appears to be, I guess, draft week. You can order Father of Mine right now, the author, in advance of a big week next week in the new league year in the NFL. Mike Florio back here on the show. How you doing, Mike?
Rich, doing great, buddy. Great to be with you as always.
Dude, writing a book. Bless you, man. This is not your first novel either that you wrote, huh?
Well, here's what happened. Now, look, I screwed around with it years and years ago, just because when you practice law, you generate a ton of paperwork and nobody ever sees it. Like 5 people see it, right?
Yeah.
And you're constantly writing and writing. And then I get into this business where I am writing and writing and writing, but it's relevant for like a day. By tomorrow, everything I will have written today is meaningless. No matter how much of myself I put into it, if I have some witty phrase that somebody sees and smiles at, it's gone by tomorrow. It's over. It's done because they're looking for tomorrow's news. And I get that. But that manifested itself first in Playmakers, which has a little more shelf life.
Yes.
Because it's a look at the last 20 years in the NFL, but it's already obsolete given everything that's happened since it came out last year. So pandemic, sat down, and just started going. And for me, it's got a Ouija board quality to it where the keys just kind of go. And the story reveals itself to me, and I don't even try to outline, although sometimes I have to figure out how I'm going to land the plane, but it just kind of goes. And that part of it is the most rewarding because it's kind of like you're reading it, not writing it, and it's revealing itself to you as it's just kind of happening. And I love getting into that kind of a mode. So anyway, long story bearable, I just keep doing it. It's my hobby now. And I don't care if anybody ever reads them, although you get more out of it if people read them and enjoy them. So we're going to give it a shot and see. No publisher for this one to cut the price point down to $4.99. I learned through Playmakers the publisher makes all the money, folks. You don't get nearly as much as they do. So $4.99 ebook, available wherever you find your ebooks. You can order it now. You'll have it April 25. There'll be a paperback version as well. It won't be $4.99, obviously, but we're going to see what happens.
Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show, the author of Father of Mine, a novel set in 1973 about the mob scene. He's joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show, kind enough to join us to set the table for next week. Before that next week arrives, I assume Rodgers is going to make a decision over the weekend. I mean, wouldn't you think? Or what are you hearing about what's going on?
I don't know. Is there going to be another darkened burrow retreat for Aaron Rodgers to
I
make
don't know, man.
Decision? It's obvious the Jets want him.
Yeah.
And it's obvious the Packers don't. That's kind of the one big takeaway that's been glossed over in all of this. On Monday, when the reports first started to surface that he had spoken with the Jets, we had all skipped over the fairly significant news that the Packers had given the Jets permission to speak to him, because it was 2 years ago, right before the draft, that the 49ers called the Packers and said, hey, you interested in trading Aaron Rodgers? And they laughed and hung up the phone. So now we've got the Packers crossing that bridge, and it's basically a Rubicon. They've crossed that river, and I don't think there's any going back for the Packers, for Rodgers, or for the Jets. I think they all have to get it done at this point. I don't think there's a plan B for any of them that makes sense once we've gotten this far down the road, unless Rodgers just says, going through this process has helped me come to the conclusion that it's time for me to retire.
Well, there's no plan B for Rodgers as another team. Is it possible that that's what the holdup may be, that there is a third team here that intrigues Rodgers? We all obviously point to the Raiders because Devontae Adams is there, the Titans because, Rodgers is apparently building a house in Nashville. So what do you got for me on that?
Well, they are decriminalizing magic mushrooms in Nevada.
Look at
which
you,
would be
man.
a drawing card for the Raiders, right? But I feel like the Packers want to have this on their own terms like they did with Favre 15 years ago, where they wanted to steer him not just out of the division but out of the conference if they could. And I wonder if there is some other team that we don't know about that Rodgers would like to play for. I wonder if the Packers are resisting, and I wonder how dirty Rodgers wants to make his hands to get to where he wants to go. Because one of the things I've floated is he could always do exactly what Favre did in 2008. Retire now and then show up later. And all of a sudden, that $59 million salary lands on their books, and they better decide what to do quickly. In 2008, the Packers had the cap space to carry Brett Favre's $12 million. I doubt they're going to have $60 million in cap space laying around, and they're not going to want to exercise their right to convert $58 million into an option bonus, because then they owe him $58 million. So if they are being difficult with him, it may take that for him to get what he really wants. But then the question is, how big of a villain does he want to be? You know, a few years ago, this was a guy that never wanted anyone to be upset with him. He's taken the heel turn, and he's embraced the 30% love me, 30% hate me, and 40% don't care reality that many seem to love now. So I don't know how much of a fight he wants to put up. But I think, Rich, that if there is somebody else out there, specifically an NFC team, that he wants, and maybe the Packers don't want to send him there, that could be a reason for some of this perceived delay. And it is a delay. I mean, we need to know what's going on. The Packers need to know what's going on. The Jets need to know what's going on. Although for the Jets, what else are they going to do at this point? Derek Carr is off the table. Jimmy Garoppolo, good luck selling that to a Jets fan. I mean, Rich, you're a Jets fan. How do they sell that? Well, you know, we got you all juiced up about Aaron Rodgers for the last 2 weeks. May we offer you a nice Jimmy Garoppolo instead?
Well, he's handsome. That's number one. But in all seriousness, no. I mean, if Jimmy Garoppolo winds up being the starting quarterback for the Jets this year, I think that's sellable as long as Rodgers is retired or stayed in Green Bay. If Rodgers goes somewhere else, thus spurning whatever the Jets flew out to Malibu to offer, that one's tough. And then, of course, though, they do have some warriors, and I use that term, you know, I don't use it lightly, in Sauce and Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, these young Turks, it would be really weird for Rodgers to say he doesn't want to play with them unless he just wants to play with Adams. There is another Mike plan that would be Lamar, and if Rodgers says no, Lamar's still sitting there, and if Rodgers says yes, then obviously Lamar would lose one more team off the table that would not be, willing to just go for it with him. What is your take on everything going on with him and the time frame that he's got in front of him, Mike?
Well, first of all, I don't know that Lamar would be viewed as anything other than the Jets settling at this point, given all this emphasis on Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah,
and again, I don't know how the fan base would feel if that's what happens. But with Lamar, and it keeps coming back to the fact that he doesn't have an agent. He's never had an agent. He needs an agent now more than ever. Based upon the people that I've talked to, there's a strong belief he'll never hire an agent because that will be perceived as admitting he was wrong to not have an agent in the first place. And we know how that stubbornness can creep into our lives and cause us to do dumb things. We double down on a mistake instead of admitting it and rectifying it. He needs an agent now to be working the market, working the back channels, trying to get people interested, trying to get a team just as a favor. Pretend you're interested. Do me a favor here. Let me leak to somebody that you're interested. Let me just get something that I can use as the ripcord on the lawnmower to get this market started for my guy. That's what happens when you have a really good agent, and that's what he needs. Because, Rich, without it, he's available now, well, as of Monday, to talk to anyone. How's that going to play out, especially when we've seen multiple teams preemptively slam the door in his face before he's even on the porch because they don't want to get to the point where he says, I want a 5-year fully guaranteed contract. So he's the one that's going to have to go out and initiate contact. He's the one that's going to have to figure out what to do, or just sit back and wait and see if anyone shows up. I'm still fascinated by the possibility of the Commanders making a play for Lamar Jackson, but you know, right now there's no sense that anybody is ready to swoop in, put an offer on the table that he'll accept. At some point, he's got to do a deal with someone. At some point in his life, presumably, he will do a long-term contract with someone. The time is now. But, again, it will be easier to get to that point if he has an agent. So this is a big mess. And, Rich, we're closer than I think people realize to the possibility of him not playing at all in 2023, because if he doesn't sign a long-term deal and the Ravens don't sign him to a long-term deal and we get to July 16 and all he can do is a one-year deal, and he says to the Ravens, I'm not playing for $32.4 million, ball's in their court at that point. Do they offer him more? They call his bluff? And does he sit out 2023 because he refuses to play for $32.4?
I can't imagine that, Mike. But you're also the perfect person to ask that, because when the word collusion gets thrown around, you're the one with the least fear of using it and sussing it out and pointing it out. you're hearing all this stuff, but you also just laid out all the reasons why there might not be a market for him. Do you think there is some sort of collusion going on here?
Rich, I think the collusion happened last year. The seeds were planted then, and the flowers are starting to pop up now. When Deshaun Watson gets the 5-year fully guaranteed contract from the Browns, who were desperate, and it was a great job by Athletes First and David Mulugheta to create a market for Deshaun Watson when he had 20-plus civil lawsuits pending, had the Saints, Panthers, Falcons, and Browns all at the table, threw the Browns aside at the perfect moment. They had pissed off Baker Mayfield, so back come the Browns with a 5-year fully guaranteed deal. But the reactions to that at the league meetings last year, on-the-record comments from guys like Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti, Falcons owner Arthur Blank, and people asking me, well, how does collusion happen in the NFL? Here's what happens. You got 32 different businesses that are supposed to be competing on everything. There was a case in the U.S. Supreme Court in 2010 that made it clear that the NFL is 32 independent businesses. It is not one business tied together with 32 branches. It's 32 independent businesses. So when they get together 4 times a year, Rich, it's like the CEOs of McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, Subway, Arby's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Long John Silver's all getting together at a resort somewhere and comparing notes on how they're going to do business and how they're going to pay employees. And that's a blatant antitrust violation. The law prohibits that. So to the extent that some of the harumphing that was going on last year among the billionaires about what Jimmy Haslam did with the Browns' Deshaun Watson contract, to the extent that happened and to the extent that stuck, that's what's causing teams now to generally say we just don't, and they're not going to come out and say it. See, you don't have to come out and say it if you never even talk to him. I think that's what's going on. If you never engage him, you never get to the point where you tell him no to his Deshaun Watson proposal, and then we don't have a stream of reports that the Falcons won't do it, the Panthers won't do it, the Dolphins won't do it, the Jets won't do it, this team won't do it, that team won't do it. Then it looks a lot more like evidence of collusion. That's the reality. The collusion happens. It's impossible to prove it.
So, interesting. I mean, and you kind of just laid out what Watson's agent did on his behalf, and that's the sort of thing that Lamar could use right here. So, before I let you go, Mike, what does next week look like? Give me the headlines, because we're obviously so stuck on when Rodgers make a decision and what's happening with Lamar, what happened with him. What give me the stars of next week outside of those two.
Well, and we know how it goes by now. Ever since the NFL put that negotiating window in place, even though free agency technically opens on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, it starts at noon. When you go on the air Monday, that's when it starts, because what's going to happen is the negotiating window opens, but within 5 minutes, I mean, by the time you're live and come back from the top of the hour break, there may be news that someone has agreed to a deal with someone. That's what happens. And by the time that the league year officially begins, some 52 hours later, 80% of the action may already be resolved. Then I think the biggest available name out there is Eagles defensive tackle Javon Hargrave. He's probably going to get paid a ton of money by someone. He's the top free agent on our list who wasn't franchise tagged. Orlando Brown, the Chiefs tackle, is going to hit the market. The name that I'm fascinated by is Baker Mayfield, though. We mentioned the Raiders in the context of Aaron Rodgers. I won't be surprised if the Raiders make a play for Mayfield. Josh McDaniels, the coach there, was tied to him 5 years ago before the draft, and McDaniels had a front-row seat for Baker Mayfield showing up in L.A. and 48 hours later erasing a 16-3 deficit against the Raiders on a Thursday night. And that just would be kind of a sneaky move by McDaniels to have a bird in the hand at the position and see what he can do while they figure out their long-term plan. And look, 2018, Mayfield was good. 2020, he was better. 21, he got injured week 2 because he made a tackle after he threw an interception. And he's never really had a chance to be the same since then. So that's the guy that I am most intrigued by, and that's the guy that, relative to all these other quarterbacks, is the one whose name gets mentioned the least.
Hey, man, if I'm Baker, I want to go to Tampa. You know what I mean? Like that would be a spot where I can get a job. I've got great receivers. I can throw it and have an opportunity to tell Kyle Trask, sorry, it's my job here. In Vegas, clearly, McDaniel says he wants to have somebody that grows there for a long time. And that's part of the reason why they're not interested, apparently, in Rodgers, which kind of makes no sense. I mean, if you clear Derek Carr's numbers off the books, you're close, right? I mean, again, I know that this is simple, probably overly simple, and that the math doesn't add up, but you can still move stuff around. Why aren't the Raiders interested in Rodgers and get Davante Adams going and the whole world going to Vegas just in time for the Super Bowl season? Make the big-ass splash. I don't get it. I don't understand.
Well, you know, the betting odds come out from time to time, and the last time I checked, the Raiders were the favorites. And I don't know whether that's because enough people are putting money on the Raiders that it skewed the numbers, but I always wonder, what does Vegas know that the rest of us don't know? But my big picture take on the Raiders is Aaron Rodgers and Josh McDaniels. I don't know that McDaniels' style of coaching is going to work with Rodgers. So the question becomes, how much of his own personal style does he want to stick in his back pocket so he can get the most out of Aaron Rodgers? And we talked to him at the scouting combine about whether Tom Brady has ruined him on other quarterbacks. And really, if Brady's not there, the next best thing is Rodgers.
Of course.
So if you're getting Aaron Rodgers, then, yeah, if I have to tiptoe around the delicate genius, I'll do it. I'll do it because it's Aaron Rodgers. If I have to be something other than Bill Belichick West, I'll do it. And so it hasn't made sense to me, because when Aaron Rodgers was at Pebble Beach, anytime someone asked him about the Raiders, you know, there was just this undercurrent that the Raiders were the place he was possibly heading. But you're right, as we get closer and closer to it, there's been no indication. That doesn't mean something's not happening behind the scenes. The Packers have kept their mouths shut. Maybe the Raiders are keeping their mouths shut too, and they're working out something quietly, and then boom, it just hits, and we're all surprised, and we process it, and we move on.
Yeah, he can go hook up with Davante Adams. It's not a long flight from Southern California if he wants to go see the ocean on an off day. I'm serious here, and Mark Davis gets the Raiders back as relevant as they've been in quite some time, and it's the Super Bowl season, and just to tell the entire fan base, we are going for it here. And let's try it out. You draft Will Levis or whoever at 7, and that person can sit and watch Aaron Rodgers in the same way that the Jets are planning to have Zach Wilson learn at the knee. Honestly, it just makes complete sense on every level. I don't understand it, and I'll just leave it there. It's a head scratcher, man.
We have never seen Mahomes and Rodgers on the field together, because there's always been something that's thrown it off, injury or whatever. COVID last time around in 2021 kept Rodgers from facing Mahomes. We'd be guaranteed 2 Mahomes and Rodgers in 2023. I mean, Rodgers, Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson becomes the worst quarterback in the division by far, and he's a potential Hall of Famer.
Mike, congrats again on the new novel, which will obviously have you back on to promote many times between now and when it comes out. How can people get Father of Mine, Mike?
Anywhere that pre-order ebooks are available. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I've got that thing set up everywhere it possibly can be. $4.99 everywhere as well. That's the price it's staying at until it comes out on April 25. And appreciate you, Rich. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about
Always.
it.
You got it. Thanks for the time here.
Free agency is upon us.
Can't wait. Have a good week next week, and we'll chat. Thanks again. Look for my call as always. That's it. Mike Florio here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.